All right, so I want to welcome to the Pierce Transit BRT webinar. We are glad to have you here today. Hoping everybody can see the screen that I'm sharing right now. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our website at ridebrt.com. If you'd like to listen to this presentation in Spanish, please click on the interpretation button below. Here's the agenda that we'll be covering tonight. My name is Kim McGilvery. I'm the Community Development Manager at Pierce Transit, and I'll be facilitating this meeting and keeping us to the agenda the best we can. Alex, you can please wave. She's also here tonight to help us manage the Q&A feature of Zoom. We also have several panelists this evening, both from Pierce Transit, the City of Tacoma TPU, and WashDOT. They will introduce themselves as they begin their section of the presentation. Again, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening. For a few Zoom tips, this meeting is in Zoom, as you can see. If you're not familiar with Zoom, every meeting's a little different. The software can be a little different, but I'm hoping that we can utilize the software to the best of our abilities. You'll notice that if you're an attendee to this meeting, you're muted and your video is not being showed. This is intentional to keep the meeting manageable. However, you can submit a question through the Q&A feature. Chat feature has been disabled. The Q&A should be located at the bottom of your screen, although it could be slightly different in a different location. If you have any questions, feel free to submit them there. We will pause between each presentation section and answer questions in real time the best we can. Again, please click the interpretation button below to listen to this presentation in Spanish. Thanks again for attending this virtual meeting. We'll be holding a drawing for a $20 Orca card at the end of this presentation. So if you would like to participate, please text your name to 253-625-4378. The drawing will be held after tonight's meeting. And with that, I would like to get into the project overview with Tina.
Thanks, Kim. And just to introduce myself again, my name is Tina Lee. I am Pierce Transit's Planning Manager, and I'm going to walk you through a fairly fast introduction to Bus Rapid Transit, our Pacific Avenue Bus Rapid Transit corridor, and some of the updates on the design as we've been moving forward. But just to start, just to say that there really is a need for the project. You know, we live in this community. We've seen changes with rapid growth, more people, more houses, and congestion in the area. And the region really is expected to continue to grow dramatically by 2040. And we're planning for this growth. So this project is one of the ways that we can help people connect to their lives. Next slide, Kim. Thanks. And so as we look at trends and projections into the future, we expect to see about a 25% increase in population by 2040. And we also expect employment to grow dramatically by about 85%. One of the interesting things that we've noticed, and just a fact that helps explain the importance of the project, is thinking about people and how we move around and what that does to the roadway. But for every 1,000 people in Washington, we average about 870 vehicles. And if you think about that expected growth that we're planning for, and that's a lot more traffic, and this is the type of project that really will help people get around. Next slide, please. So this really requires an effective solution and one that's lasting. Next slide. And BRT is one of the ways that we can do that. So today, what we're going to walk you through is our Pacific Avenue Bus Rapid Transit Corridor project. And this is a significant investment. It's about a $170 million investment in our community that is efficient. And it's a cost-effective solution, helping Tacoma and Pierce County manage the growth that we know is already happening. Next slide. So just to start, you know, what is Bus Rapid Transit? And for Pierce Transit, it's a new line of service. It's an improved transit service, and we often call it high capacity transit. And the service will operate along Pacific Avenue, State Route 7, between downtown Tacoma and Spanaway, from roughly 208th to downtown Tacoma. And I'll go into more detail as we go through the slides, but think of it as light rail that's operated by a rubber tire bus. It's that high quality of service. And we estimate by 2040, we'll be carrying 2.2 million riders that'll be boarding that service annually. Next slide, thanks. And it is a very effective solution. So BRT offers many benefits over our traditional bus route that we're operating. One of the things are that the service is much more frequent. So think of a bus trip that's coming to a station every 10 to 15 minutes during the peak. Enhanced stations that have things like real-time arrival signs and brighter lighting. There'll be unique branded vehicles that can carry up to 90 passengers. And these vehicles have room for things like bicycles inside. And also it's easier for a wheelchair and a stroller to board because of some of the amenities that come along with this type of service. There's also things like off-fare fare collection, so you pay before you board the bus, and raised platforms and multiple doors on those buses. So all these things are little improvements that make it easier and speed up this type of a service. Next slide, Kim. And it's efficient. It's an investment that is very efficient, and it's primarily funded through grants and partnership funds that are paying for this investment in our community. There's a real benefit to other local transit services also because many of our local routes connect with this bus rapid transit corridor, and that makes it much easier to ride not only the local service, but the BRT service as well. And we chose to focus on Route 1 as our first bus rapid transit in Pierce County because it is Pierce Transit's highest ridership route. It has the most frequent use and the highest boardings. And on an average weekday, we generally expect to see about 3,500 people boarding that part of the Route 1 that becomes our Pacific Avenue BRT corridor. And that represents about 12% of Pierce Transit's ridership. We know there's a lot of development and growth targeted along the corridor, and about 55,000 people today are living within a half a mile of the corridor today, and that number will increase by about 25% by 2040. So more people will have access to this high quality service to reach their life needs. So what are some of the common characteristics that you see on a bus rapid transit system? These are things that most BRT systems will have. These are things like that frequent bus service. So bus trips every 10 to 15 minutes, accessible larger buses that allow for better wheelchair access. Instead of bus stops that are a pole in the ground, here you see stations, and each one of the stations has really unique features that make it a significant type of a facility or station. There's that raised platform, and the buses that are operating on the corridor tend to be larger buses. These tend to be 60-foot articulated buses that have more room, and more people can ride the corridor and benefit from it. In addition, our passengers, they pay before they board the bus, again, like light rail. So at each of the stations, there are ticket vending machines, Orca card readers on the platforms, and these little incremental changes make the entire service faster and much easier to use. There's also things like real-time arrival information. So the passenger that's waiting at that station, they know if that bus is 5 minutes away or 8 minutes away, and it makes it much more convenient and safer. And then a real improvement, though, is travel time. So from one end of the corridor to the next end of the corridor, it's faster for someone to ride that service because of these little incremental changes that we've been able to include in the service. Some of the savings could be as much as 15 to 35 minutes, or 15 to 35%, so 10 to 20 minutes along the corridor, depending on where a person starts their trip and where they're traveling to. So that's a vast improvement in the ride. Next slide, Kim. So this BRT line on Pacific Avenue is about 14.4 miles long from end to end, and many of the people along the corridor do have lower incomes. They experience higher unemployment and are almost twice as transit dependent than the Pierce County average. So this new transportation service really will serve the corridor's population well. Next slide. There's also a lot of strengths, and typically BRT systems generate increased economic development along a corridor because people have much easier access to businesses, to schools, and to jobs. And when we look at our BRT system on Pacific, it's going to run or travel through 6 opportunity zones. And these are zones that were designated by the state, and they're designed in order to attract investment. So investment in the community, and then this transit service will serve the community. The city of Tacoma and Pierce County have already identified this corridor for higher density, mixed use, and transit-oriented development. And so bus rapid transit service is just one of the ways to support these higher density areas. Next slide. Another way we talk about the project is about the safety benefits or improvements that it's going to bring to the community. During the early design and the feasibility study, even before Pierce Transit's Board of Commissioners adopted the concept that we're talking about, we were talking with residents and stakeholders, and we heard from a lot of them that they had interest in the median option that is one of the options in our BRT corridor, because they felt it was safer. And some of the reasons for that are crossings along the corridor. It makes it a shorter distance for someone to cross Pacific Avenue. So our current concept does have a number of features which improve safety along the corridor. And those are things like adding 7 signalized crosswalks for safer pedestrian crossings, enhancing pedestrian safety with 22 refuge islands at those median stations. And that gives someone who's crossing Pacific Avenue the opportunity to stop at that station in the median and wait if they choose to before finishing crossing the street there. We create 4 miles of transit lanes, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about those, but those are opportunities for first responders to use those lanes in emergency situations. At the same time, we're preserving general purpose lanes. With this plan, we don't plan to eliminate any of those general purpose lanes for cars that are currently traveling on the community or on the corridor. And then we also control left turns at 21 intersections for improved safety along the corridor. And then lastly, one of the graphics that I'll show you in just a second, and actually it's on here as well, I see, we have 3 roundabouts, and these will help with smoother traffic flow. Those 3 roundabouts right now are proposed in our Pierce County section of the corridor. So the next slide that we're going to show you is the route overview. And so if you look at this slide, it's a map of the route. And if you think of our Route 1 today, it's operating on Pacific Avenue. It is that 14.4 miles. It's the blue line on this map. And there's a number of things I want to point out here and explain. But the green lines that are on this map are local bus routes. And those are the routes that intersect with our BRT corridor. And these are opportunities for further trips for people either traveling to or from the bus rapid transit corridor, really expanding the reach of transit in the community. Before the COVID pandemic, we were seeing 3,500 boardings each weekday along this BRT corridor. So it's a significant number of people who are using the corridor. And with that higher frequency and these improvements, we're really estimating a significant increase in ridership. The other thing I really want to point out on this map are the white dots that are on the line, and these are the station locations. Today, when you're a rider on the Route 1, there are about 64 pairs of bus stops. Often that's just a pole in the ground. It may be a shelter. With this project, we're proposing 30 pairs of stations. Each one of those is a significant station that has the amenities I'm going to show you in just a few more slides. But those stations are slightly further apart than a local bus stop. And there are fewer stops with the BRT corridor. What that does is it makes the system a little faster. It means people have to travel just a little bit further to get to those bus stops. But in most cases, someone located along the corridor will only have to travel about a quarter of a mile or less from their starting point to the nearest station. Typically, that's about a 5-mile walk. And the current stops that are going to be removed are typically those that have lower boardings and have fewer transit connections at them. So one of the exercises that we did very early on was looking at where are the best locations for stations, where are the highest ridership happening, where is development happening, and where is a lot of activity that people want to travel to. Also with the BRT system, it includes many infrastructure and pedestrian safety improvements throughout the corridor, making walking and even rolling to the BRT easier. Next slide, please. So there are a number of different treatments along this BRT corridor, and there are lane types, and those are really based on traffic and station location. These color graphics give you a sense of what those lane treatments are, and those include things like the bus traveling in mixed-use traffic along part of the route, as well as the bus in the median lane and also the bus in curbside lanes. And those lanes can be accessed by cars that need to make a right turn either to a business or to a side street. And the current plans do not call for removal of any general purpose lanes along the corridor. So next slide, please. This graphic just gives you a really high-level summary of where these different lane treatments will be located. If you look at the orange part of this route, those are the proposed median lanes, and the stations in those areas are in the median or the center of the roadway. The green portion of this route are what we call business access transit lanes. These are BAT lanes. The bus is in the lane like an HOV on the right, and stations are also on the right near the sidewalk. Cars can travel in that BAT lane if they need to make a right turn, either to a side street or a business. And the dark blue section of the route here is where the bus is in the general lane. Stations are on in the right near the sidewalk as well. Next slide, please. So branding is also really important, and we're really pleased to be able to share that our Pierce Transit Board of Commissioners recently selected the name Stream for our bus rapid transit system. Because this name applies to the entire system, it means that our corridors in the future, BRT 2, 3, or 4, will also be under this Stream name. And in addition to that, we're looking at what do we call the lines. So Community Transit up to the north has a BRT system called SWIFT. Their individual lines are blue, green, orange lines. At Pierce Transit, we're exploring the idea of sponsorship. Could we sponsor our lines or could we sponsor our stations? Next slide. So the next few slides I'm going to talk to you about are the stations, and we'll walk through and show you what a typical station might look like. I'd mentioned that we're expecting to have about 30 pairs of stations along our corridor. Each of these will have some very similar features, and these are things like Orca card readers, real-time bus signage letting riders know when that next bus will arrive at the station, ticket vending machines, parking for bikes or e-scooters. The platform is the length of the entire bus, and the platform is also slightly raised for improved accessibility and making it easier for someone to step on or off the bus. Next slide. Here's another image of what the typical station might look like. And here, it's really easy to identify the location for bikes, and you can see where a bike or e-scooters might be located. One thing I want to note, though, we're not requiring that bikes stay at the stations. What's also unique about this type of a system is that bikes go inside the bus, and there will actually be a bike rack inside each of the BRT vehicles. So when someone's boarding, they can just roll that bike into the BRT vehicle with them. And you can also see there's additional lighting at each of these stations. Next slide. This image is just another way of looking at a station, and what I want to point out here is the opportunity where the real-time signage may be suspended from the station. And again, if I'm a passenger and I'm waiting for that next bus to arrive, it could tell me the bus is 5 minutes away, or it might say that it's 3 minutes away, and really helping with the ease of riding the service. Next slide. This is a fairly new image, and what we really like about this, it starts to share what the corridor might look like. And this is a median station and also median lanes that are traveling in the center of the roadway. This is a concept of what it could look like at Pacific and 38th in Tacoma with this type of a system. You start to see the perspective of the size of the station and how it really fits at the intersection there. And how this is working here is that bus that you see traveling to you is traveling southbound. That bus just left downtown Tacoma and is traveling out to Spanaway. It actually stopped at a station on the other side of the intersection before it went through that intersection. And you see two people actually waiting at the station. They're waiting for a bus that's going to travel into this picture heading northbound. It'll stop at that station, and then it's going to travel on into downtown Tacoma. these images and some of the graphics that give you a sense of lane treatments can be found on our website as well at ridebrt.com. Go ahead and go to the next image, please.
Tina, we do have a question on this.
Okay.
So the question is, how are the left turns for cars supposed to work in the median lane areas? From the plans, it looks like one has to cross over the BRT line to get to a very short left lane. Looks very dangerous.
There will actually be left turn lanes, and it'll be controlled by that signal for someone to make the left turn. So that left turn lane would be on the other side of the station that you see here. So if I'm traveling northbound, I'd have a left turn lane, and then I would be making my turn.
Thank you. The other question we had is, do you know how many bikes will be able to fit on each bus?
Oh, I should know this. I believe it's about 4, and I'd have to check that. We're still making that final determination on what style of bike rack we're going to have. As we've talked to people and also investigated them, Community Transit has a really well-received bike rack that they use in their BRT line. So that might be the system that we use.
And another question, Route 1 already has 10 to 15 minute schedule, which is generally late during rush hour. Are you not replacing that line? Are we not replacing that line?
No, we are replacing portions of the Route 1. So the Route 1 that operates in the southern area all the way into downtown Tacoma would be replaced by the BRT. And then the section of the Route 1 that is on 6th Avenue would stay as Route 1 as a local service. The one thing I forgot to mention when we were looking at the map earlier was one of the big changes, and this is also one that's really important to the corridor, is that today the Route 1 does not travel to the Tacoma Dome station. And with Bus Rapid Transit, with this corridor, it will travel to the Tacoma Dome station, and it's going to make that connection to regional services and other Pierce Transit services much easier. So someone could board Sounder Commuter Rail, Sound Transit Regional Express. They could catch an Amtrak train or a Greyhound bus or even Intercity Transit, and Route 1 BRT would be a way for them to get to the Tacoma Dome station.
And a follow-up to that, your changes include a cut in stops. How do you intend to take care of those who will have to walk rather further to get to a bus?
So we've looked at the distances, and we believe that most people at the most would have about a quarter of a mile, which really is a standard for connecting to bus service. We'll be adding some sidewalks along where we're doing improvements, and those are different ways that will help people connect. When we've done the analysis, it's generally anywhere from a 5 to 8 minute walk in order to reach one of those stations from that area that we believe people will be coming to catch the service.
And can bikes use the lanes too on streets with little shoulder?
Bikes would still be using the roadway the way they do today. In fact, the next image that we're going to show you actually shows you a bike lane in it, and that's a bike lane that exists. So if today there's a bike lane or bikes are traveling on the roadway, they would still travel in it the same way that they do today. So this image that you have up on the screen right now is another concept of what a station can look like. It's in Pierce County. It's on Pacific at Military, and this is one of the stations that's on the right. There is a BAT lane, or business access lane, or a dedicated lane just in front of the station there, and there's an existing bike lane. And so with the project, we make sure that we replace those bike lanes that exist so they continue to be available to users.
And another question, Tina,
okay.
can you clarify if the local transit Route 1 will connect to the Tacoma Dome coming from TCC 6th Avenue or just the new BRT section of the route?
Right now, just the BRT section of the route will connect. You know, we've looked at where's the right place to stop the Route 1. Is it at Commerce Street? Is it at University of Washington? Is it at Tacoma Dome? There are a lot of other ways to get to Tacoma Dome Station from that Commerce Street. Riders could take Link Light Rail, or they could take a number of other buses that are traveling there. So right now, the proposal is for us to stop that service at Commerce Street.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So as I mentioned, this is another image of what a station could look like. This is a station that's on the right side. It is Pacific Avenue and Military Road. And you see how the station is situated near the sidewalk at this location. Also, there is a bike lane, and that is maintained. You can see some of the other amenities as well, the ticket vending machines, lighting. You start to see some of the detail of the station. So just another way that the station may possibly fit in with the community. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Kim. And with this, I'm going to turn it over to Sean briefly. He's going to talk about timeline.
All right, thanks, Tina. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm Sean Robertson, construction project manager for Pierce Transit on this project. For some of you that are new to the project, I'm just going to go over what we've done to date and where we're going in the future for this project. So the project really started back in 2017. Back then, we really looked at mode selection. So, whether we would go with a BRT system or a light rail. After 2017, we determined that BRT was the way to go and would effectively benefit the community with the funding that we had. So at that time, we selected the BRT route and then began looking at funding. So we began the FTA Small Starts application back in 2018. We were rated medium high and have continued every year since then when we do our annual update to be rated medium high. For those of you that aren't familiar with that system, you have to be rated at least a medium to get funding. And so we're sitting pretty well at a medium high rating. We also started doing traffic analysis back in 2018 and began the initial NEPA or federal environmental review back in 2018. 2019, we just continued to do environmental review. We finally kicked off the design and started at 5% design back in 2019. And then we launched the BRT Community Committee back in 2019. 2020, we have continued design. As we currently sit, we're getting close to 60% design. We're close also at least finalizing the NEPA or federal environmental process. We'll be jumping into SEPA here shortly. And then we are just about to start beginning property acquisition as well. That's actually going to start in 2021. We have, though, started reaching out to folks down the corridor that could potentially be impacted by this property. So 2021 is going to be mostly finalizing the design and getting ready for construction. We are looking at an early 2022 construction start date with roughly 28 months of construction. I think it's important just to note that the 28 months of construction does not include utility work, and we do have Tacoma Power and Tacoma Water here that I think will do a brief introduction here in a couple slides. But I did want to note that you'll see some upfront utility work taking place in front of us in probably late 2022 or 2021, that is. And construction is currently scheduled to wrap up in mid-2024. We're looking at a late 2024 date for revenue service on this project. Next slide. So project phases. This is a long corridor, 14 miles. It's confusing, I think, to most people to really comprehend all the work that's taking place down this long corridor. So we broke up this project into phases for many reasons. We're going through several jurisdictions, about 7 miles of the corridor. The southern 7 miles is in the county, and also is overseen by WashDOT because it's a state route 7. And then north of 96, you get into Tacoma, and then the north 7 miles or so is in Tacoma. So the first phases, A, B, and C, are all in the county. Those will be permitting through WashDOT for that work. And then phases D, E, and F will continue into the city Tacoma and will be permitting through them. Phase A is where we plan to start. So when I say an early 2022 start date for construction, we would be starting down close to 208. For those of you that aren't aware, we're also working on a Spanaway Transit Center down at State Route 7 and 208. So the BRT would effectively turn around and lay over at 208th there, and then would head north from there. So we'll be spending roughly 4 to 5 months per phase. So most of 2022 will be spent in the county portion, and then in early 2023 is when we would be starting construction in the city portion. And then we would conclude with construction in mid 2024, and most likely the downtown Tacoma area. Next slide.
Tina, before we move on to this slide, we have a few questions. So one of them is, wouldn't that investment lead to eventually to generate that will push out those low income people who you claim to be helping?
No, I mean, we don't see that. We see that this investment helps people. There be more density, more housing, and so there's more opportunity for people to be living around that corridor.
And next question, what are the estimated BRT trip times between 56 and Tacoma Dome Station?
You know, can that person give us a way to contact them and get back to them with that information?
Yes.
You know, that specific of a range, I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
And will we be sharing what the Spanaway Transit Center will look like and provide for our community?
Absolutely, absolutely. We can definitely be sharing that. It's still very conceptual in design, so we have some very rough drawings. Like right now, we can say we did purchase the property, so we own the land that is the Spanaway Transit Center, and I believe that was about 7 acres. It's going to be built in phases, and the first phase will be the bus island, the zones, as well as the operator comfort station, and also roughly about 30 parking stalls. And then the second phase would be a full build out to about 215 parking stalls and additional improvements on how those buses can go in and out of that facility onto SR7, so that as traffic increases, we're able to help those buses get onto that roadway.
And currently, I believe there's a total of 4 lanes for both north and south travel. Mm-hmm. Are the lanes getting expanded or reduced for vehicle traveling? Also, if this is being expanded, how much of the sidewalk will get removed for the 14 miles of the Pacific Street?
You know, it's what I can say is that no general purpose lane is being removed. So there's always 4 lanes of general purpose lanes that are still traveling along the corridor. So wherever there are those 4 lanes, those would stay for general purpose travel back and forth. In areas where we have the median stations or median lanes, we would be eliminating the center turn lane, and that would become a bus lane, or we might even add a second bus lane in some of those areas. So there are some additional lanes there. Sidewalks in many areas are actually being improved or widened in some places to try to meet the city codes. And that's part of the widening that might need to happen as we finish that design. And a good place to look to kind of get a sense of what is happening in more detail along the corridor is that ridebrt.com website. There are some PDF files that give you a sense of what that corridor looks like and where those lane treatments are.
Next question, are the stops designed or the stations designed? Any input from the disability community regarding accessibility?
We are designing them now, and we have been meeting with some of the different community groups to try to get input as we've been designing them. And we continue with this outreach. So, you know, that design is not 100% yet. We're still moving our way to that 60% design. So if there are additional suggestions that help improve that, as we're meeting with these groups, that's a great time to try to give us that input.
Great. Are there any stops on the hill between Pacific and 34th and 26th and A?
Between Pacific and 30th.
Do you want me to go back to the map?
Sure.
There's a stop at 26 and A. And then there is also a stop close to 34th as well. So,
a great one.
So yeah, there'll be we don't have a stop mid-hill, but we have ones at the bottom and then closer to the top of the hill.
Thank you.
Perfect, thanks.
What happens to the water holding swells that help keep our aqua clean?
I can touch on that, and then I lump sum or GCCM question as well that I can cover. So, we are in some cases replacing some of those if we disturb them. If we can keep them as is, we are doing that. But if anything, we'll be putting in more swales because we are widening the roadway in some areas. So we are required to mitigate that extra storm water from that. So any swale that you see today may look a little different in the future, but we will be replacing those with something similar.
Great. And the next question is, what type of construction contract? Lump sum or GCCM?
This is GCCM. We selected Granite Construction as our GCCM about a year ago, and they've been working with us as a partner through most of 2020. And if all goes well, once we get to 90% design towards the end of 2022, we hope that we will come to a MAC or max agreeable cost with Granite, and they'll continue to be the contractor during construction.
Great. Will there be any comfort stations for passengers as well? I think the only one now is at TDS, but this would be very helpful for a variety of passengers.
No, this project has not designed additional comfort stations for passengers as part of it. The stations you can see are you know, a station, and it doesn't have that type of amenity or facility. So we would be relying on you know, what is around the corridor. And it's not something that you typically see along a bus rapid transit corridor either.
Mm-hmm. And the last question at this time is general question after presentation. How has the BRT agency endeavored to ensure full accessibility of this transit system?
So, I mean, broadly, you know, making sure that we're designing the stations to be accessible, trying to improve sidewalks and connections where we can do that. You know, we can't do that along the entire 14 miles of the corridor, but we are able to do that for some connections along the corridor. The stations themselves are a raised platform. They're about 9.5 inches raised, so it makes it a near level boarding. When that vehicle pulls up to the station, there is a small lift that can be deployed and help with that accessibility. Those buses have 3 doors, and that is also to help with the ease of boarding. And what else? I mean, there are so many features that we try to think about and make sure the system is accessible. Thinking about the off fare payment, just the fare itself. So yeah, we have been trying to make it and the rest of our system as accessible as possible.
All right, and we'll take a pause for now on questions
Okay.
and get back to the presentation.
Okay, so I think we're at project funding. So just quickly, I had mentioned that this was a $170 million investment in the community. This slide really gives you a sense of where that funding is coming from. And $95 million of the funding has already been secured from various funding sources, primarily grants. There's a very significant investment from Sound Transit of about $60 million in partnership funds. And part of that is because of the importance of that connection to the Tacoma Dome Station and the regional services. We're going to be requesting the remaining funding from federal grants. This is a small starts grant request, and we'll be applying for that $75 million in 2021. We've all, as Sean had mentioned, we'd already been ranked in this funding source, and we have that medium-high ranking, which really does bode well for our project. And that'll be the next big step as we move forward and work to actively secure that funding from the Federal Transit Administration. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And just speaking about coordination with our partners, and we talked a little bit about property. So sections of the corridor will need to be widened, and that is needed for those new BRT transit lanes and some of the other improvements like sidewalks or utilities. And that's going to require purchase of portions of property, typically smaller sections along the roadway throughout the corridor. So we've been very active in trying to continue to reach out with property owners along the corridor, and so far have been working individually with about 300 property owners, really to help them understand the project, try to build awareness of the project, and answer questions on how it's affecting either businesses or homeowners whose properties we think might be impacted. In total, we've had about 55 virtual and on-site meetings with property owners this year. And so that's a really good start, and we're hoping to continue that and answer as many questions as we can. Another plug for that ridebrt.org website. On that are those PDF files, 4 PDF files that help someone see what the concept for the corridor is looking like right now, but also information on how to reach us and how our property team can make contact and reach you. Throughout the project, we've also been working closely with our partners, including the City of Tacoma and the Washington State Department of Transportation, Pierce County, and even Tacoma Public Utilities. And as we're getting closer to that next big design stage, trying to work our way to 60% design and planning for construction, we know we have to really continue that coordination closely with our partners. And to that end, we've recently agreed on terms for an agency partnering agreement. And this is an agreement that sets the foundation on how our agencies work together as we continue to move forward with this project. So we're really pleased that we've been able to put that agreement in place. And we've also asked these partners to join us and help us answer some of the questions that are really specific to their work. And I believe first we have Tacoma Public Utilities, and they're going to give you a quick intro.
Well, thank you, Tina.
You're welcome.
Okay, yes, Tacoma Power has been involved, working closely with Pierce Transit in the City of Tacoma, and subsequently with the Department of Transportation. This is a very significant project to Tacoma Power. It will involve a great deal of work. And as I go through this list here, we are involved in this project, not only within the City of Tacoma, but also in the Spanaway and Elk Plain areas. We're looking at having to move somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 150 poles and the wire that they support. As much as we possibly can, we're going to try to keep the existing system overhead. And there's a number of reasons for that. A, it's generally the least cost. B, the services that come from those poles to the individual homes and businesses are already overhead. For many of them are, and so that cuts down on impacts to the customers. And then also the conversion to underground can be very not only expensive, but it can impact the roadway as far as the actual construction activity a much longer period of time than the overhead. So there's reasons to try to remain overhead, but in those areas where we cannot remain overhead and be safe, we will be working with Pierce Transit on alternatives, and then eventually in some of these cases we'll have to convert our facilities to underground. At such a time, we will be working with our customers and connecting them with Pierce Transit when needed concerning their individual services too. Tacoma Power will need additional property rights and easements for our poles and wires on private property. And along with that, if we do go underground, we will need additional property rights for that, those facilities. Unfortunately, in order to do the work safely and efficiently, we will have to take power outages on homes and businesses, and we work very closely with all of our customers about when those outages are least impactful. We know that every outage is impactful. We try to find it when it is least impactful, so that our work can be done safely, and your service is least. We don't interfere with how you use our service as least as we can. So, and then the timing. Now, the scope of work is so big that we are likely to start our work. That means the big orange trucks out on the road as much as a year ahead of Pierce Transit's current construction schedule. So that means that we could be working on Pacific north of 96th towards the end of 2021. And that is our current schedule, trying to match and meet the schedule that Pierce Transit has set out with their contractor. So that is our intent. If you can go on to the next slide. Okay, so here's some of the challenges we have. We're also working with the city and the state on where to safely install or relocate our poles. In this particular case, this may be a location where a pole may go. It may not be, but it just shows that that is behind the sidewalk. And that puts this on private property, and we have to be very careful and conscious of where our wires end up relative to the adjoining buildings, as you see, so that they can be maintained safely. And so these are a lot of and it's not just the power lines we're trying to account for, we're also accounting for the communication lines that are attached to our poles. So this is just one example. We can go on to the next. And yeah, this here, in this case, it could be right up against the building. That's not generally what we like to do. And so we will be working with Pierce Transit as they continue their design effort, and we continue to review their designs. So if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. However, I don't have answers to specific parcels, properties, or services at this time, because we're not that far down the road of design.
It doesn't look like we have any questions at this time.
Okay, well, that's you can through Pierce Transit. If you have any questions for Tacoma Power, you're more than welcome to pass that along, and we'll be responsive to you.
And actually, one question just came in. How much
Okay.
warning will customers get with power losses?
To be honest with you, that tends to vary, but what you will likely have is either one of our account executives, like Dave Rosholm or Jennifer Collins Ramos, contacting the businesses and some of the homeowners. Our crew foremen are also very adept at contacting people and talking with the individual customers about what work needs to be done and when is a good time to perform, the outage. And many times we try to keep those outages as short as possible. I can't talk about specific places, but something to the effect of a half hour in some cases, but in other cases it could be hours, just because of the nature of the work and what we are trying to do. We will work very closely with each and every customer on the outages.
All right, with that, I believe we have Jesse.
Thank you, Kim. So my name is Jesse Angel. I'm with Tacoma Water, and much like Tacoma Power, we've been working with Pierce Transit on this project, and the improvements are going to have several impacts to our existing water infrastructure. Several of these bus platforms that have been discussed will be placed in such a way that they will have impacts on existing water mains. And so we're going to have to relocate those. We obviously can't have water mains under bus platforms. It makes them nearly impossible to maintain. So those will have to be relocated. I don't have an exact location or number of those platforms that'll be in conflict and where we'll need to relocate those, but we're developing those as we move along. There's also fire hydrants along this length of road that will be affected. Several of these intersections are getting pushed out with sidewalks and everything else. And so those hydrants will be affected, and we'll have to move these fire hydrants to adjust to the improvements. The water main sections and the fire hydrants will have impacts on customers. Much like Joe was talking about previously, we will have to shut customers down to make connections and stuff like that. We try and limit those to 8 hours. We will work during the evenings or other times to adjust to businesses and stuff like that. Another thing that's going to be a big impact is along this section is we have roughly 259 water services. These are the individual water services for the residents and the businesses along here that will be affected. Some of these are simply pushing the meter back as the sidewalk has been pushed back to do that. But even that simple process will require the water service to be taken out of service while we do that work. Some of the locations we are going to have to actually physically move the services in a way that will be more disruptive. We're trying to limit those. We want to actually make these as smooth as possible. So we'll be developing basically where you have to move these to as we develop along with that. Much like Tacoma Power, we are going to be out there well ahead of Pierce Transit doing this work. We'll be working with our account execs, and we will be doing outreach as we are out there doing water main work. I don't have exact locations on a lot of this area. We're still working on that. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
We did get a question. Is there a wastewater stormwater pump station near 52nd and Pacific? Have there been conversations with environmental services about potential impacts?
Unfortunately, because it's wastewater, I do not deal with wastewater. So that would be something that would have to be answered potentially by environmental services, who is also in the process of coming on board and understanding the impacts to their system. So that's something that we could definitely pass along to that group, and they could get an answer to that question.
Thank you. And with that, I believe we have WashDOT.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Awesome. So my name is Manuel Abarca, and I work for Washington State Department of Transportation in the Olympic region in the traffic office. And our office is in charge of the traffic analysis for this project in terms of we're the review agency. And that traffic analysis is basically following two parallel tracks, and they're very interrelated. And the first one is basically a corridor analysis of what is the condition today, and then what is the condition going to be when the project is built. Now, part of a more finer look at that is what we call the intersection control evaluation process. And what that is a best management practice that is used by, I would say, more than half the DOTs in the US. And what that does is that it looks at performance measures and it screens the best intersection treatment for the controlled intersections that are out there. Mostly existing on the corridor. You drive through and you see that it's dominated by traffic signals. We've gone through the evaluation with the criteria with the transit agency, along with our partners at the city of Tacoma. And through that process, we have identified 3 locations where roundabouts are going to be installed. The remaining intersections are all going to be traffic signal. Next slide, please. So part of why WashDOT has been moving towards installing more and more roundabouts is that we're starting to find that roundabouts fit in perfectly with who we want to be as a department. It's right there in our mission and our value statements to promote safety, to innovate, and also to create projects that are sustainable. And what we find in the hundreds of roundabouts that we've installed on the state system is that they really do improve traffic flow, and they really make a more equitable balance between the vehicle, bicycles, and pedestrians. And there's lots of advantages safety-wise for why we install roundabouts, but perhaps one of the strongest attributes of them is that during the times when it's not heavily congested, you get through much faster. You don't have to slow down. And throughout the state, we have examples of where roundabouts are on transit routes and they coexist beautifully. So with that, if there's any questions, and if I can't answer, what I would be doing is I would be forwarding those questions to our subject matter experts.
We don't have any questions at this moment, but maybe later on during the Q&A section. All right. Community outreach is extremely important for this project, and we have formed a BRT community committee that meets quarterly. The purpose of this committee is to bring together representatives from transit users, local businesses, residential organizations, and other community-based organizations to learn more about the project, discuss its impacts, and most importantly, share with their respective groups. Our 4th meeting will be held this January. We also have a virtual BRT open house tour online that has been translated into Spanish and Vietnamese. To date, we've had approximately 1,500 sessions. We are now utilizing Pierce Transit's sales and outreach team to be the liaison between the BRT project team and residents and business owners along the corridor. This team will work closely in their section of the corridor, especially during construction, to ensure customers are kept up to date and questions are answered. In addition, we realize not everybody is able to attend this type of scheduled meeting. So to bridge that gap, we're in the process of planning pop-up events along the corridor to reach as many community members and answer questions. So you may see us once COVID is over and we get past that at your local grocery store or at community events. So we plan to come to you instead of having you come to these type of meetings, although they're a great tool for us to provide information to you. We still want to get out there and reach those folks who can attend. With this concludes our presentation tonight. We're now open for additional questions. And if you have questions, again, please enter them into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Don't forget, if you want to be entered into a drawing for a $20 Orca card, please text your name to 253-625-4378. The drawing will be held after tonight's meeting. Again, thank you for your time this evening to learn more about our exciting new project for Pierce Transit and for our Pierce County community. And with that, we'll look at our Q&As and see if there's more questions. So one question, in the past, Pacific Avenue was described as one of the top 3 busiest roadways in Puget Sound. At one time listed as the busiest roadway, second only to Aurora Avenue in Seattle area. Where does the traffic volume today on Pacific Avenue rate in our region? Tina, would you be able to answer that?
No, I can't answer, where it rates compared to others. It's not a way that I've looked at it or seen it. So
Sure.
I was actually looking to see what I could find on some of the traffic counts, and I found some of our traffic analysis, and so the traffic count changes on different sections of the corridor, and Manuel probably knows this way better than I do because this is his corridor. So one of the statistics I found was that the average daily traffic count and that south end by Military Road is like about 38,000. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, so
it
will go from about, let's do round numbers. So depending on where you are on the corridor, the average daily traffic is anywhere from 20,000 to about 40,000.
There you go. Thank you.
And there are certain areas, obviously, that, as you drive the corridor, you can experience that. But how that rates with some of our other state routes and arterials, off the top of my head, when you start getting around 40,000, that's probably at the peak level of what a 4-lane arterial is going to carry. It's not going to carry much more than that, which kind of explains why this particular corridor was selected for this project.
Thank you. Being that the BRT will improve access to Sound Transit service, has Pierce Transit looked at applying for Sound Transit access funds to help pay for this project?
It's not a source of funding that we've looked into. I actually don't think we're eligible to apply for that pot of money for this project. And with Sound Transit, with the investment they're already making in the project, it's pretty significant because they're already contributing that $60 million to the project.
All right. How many lanes will the roadway have when the project is finished, including the bus-only lanes? Plus, how wide are the sidewalks going to be? Will there be protected bike lanes?
Well, it's really going to vary. Look at worst case scenario, we'll be having 2 northbound and 2 southbound lanes, and then 2 bus-only median lanes. So you have 6 lanes there. And then there are occasions where we might have a right or left turn pocket. So I believe the maximum width would be about 8 lanes. But in those areas, we will have a median. So for pedestrians today, if you cross the 4 lanes plus usually a turn pocket, so 5 lanes, you wouldn't have to cross more than 4 or so lanes before you get into that median refuge. So the overall crossing will be more, but we're trying to make the crossings or ability to have a median refuge create a shorter crossing or equal crossing to what's out there today.
And will there be protected bike lanes?
Yes, we actually showed, I think, a picture down in the southern portion of the project that kept protected bike lanes. So where there are bike lanes today, we'll be keeping those. I believe the city still has some plans to install additional bike lanes in various parts of the corridor. So where we can, we're trying to plan for future bike lanes. But the existing ones today will remain and still be protected.
With the amount of traffic at peak times, how effective will a roundabout be? Are there examples of a roundabout on a major traffic count road like Pacific Avenue?
Well, what I can tell you is that roundabouts do very well at very, very high peaks. And there are numbers of examples all throughout the state where this is happening and throughout the country. And I can name incident after incident where, for instance, the interstate was disrupted in a particular location, and the roundabouts were able to handle all of the additional flow that was generated with everybody trying to go all the different directions. So the roundabouts, I believe, are not going to be the limiting factor that's going to limit the carrying capacity for vehicles on this project.
Thank you. Are there concerns that the planned funding is going to change with the loss of funds this year?
You know, we watch the budget closely, and we track and we try to really stay in touch with, particularly our federal and our state funding partners. The major portion of that funding is already under contract, and we call that secure because we have it under contract. And then that last portion, that 75 million, the small starts, is funds that we do not have under contract, but you know, we have been rated, and we're continuing to work with FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, closely, so they're aware of our project, and we keep them up to date and really try to stay in good standing with them. That source of funding is one that has come about each year. What we sometimes don't know is, you know, will that money be there right when we want to start a certain piece of work? So we have to really stay in touch with FTA. And you know, one of the things we're watching, we have a change in administration that's happening. So there'll be some different people probably in office at some of those federal levels. So making sure we maintain those relationships. It does sound like those infrastructure investments are funding areas that they'll want to make investments in. So we'll be watching that closely.
Are there any impacts to school bus routes along those spots? Could a district have students meet at one of your shelters?
I can try to answer that one. So Stewart Middle School comes to mind just because it is directly on the corridor there at 50th. We've been in contact with school districts to figure out their bus routes so that we can accommodate them. We don't plan on any changes, so it's more us accommodating and making sure that those bus routes for the schools can continue to operate as they do today.
Can I add on that one too? Part of the question, could a school district share a shelter with us? We have done that type of thing at bus stops in downtown Tacoma, down near our Commerce Street facility. We've identified locations, and even at some of our transit centers, we've been able to work with Tacoma Public School District and allow a school bus to use a zone, because it's made it easier at times for students to get off a local bus and maybe transfer onto a public school bus to finish a trip. I think it would be really challenging in this case, though, to have that type of arrangement, because the buses are traveling so frequently every 10 minutes in that peak, and all the pieces of this corridor are really to keep those buses moving. And a situation where a school bus may block or stop that bus from reaching into the zone could really delay the schedule and have a ripple effect. So it would probably be a challenge to have that type of arrangement at these particular stations.
Thank you. Has there been a decrease in ridership due to COVID? And for the future, I was curious if the ridership may even decline as options of work from home, remote learning for students. Is there any change in the plans for this project?
No, there is no change in plans for this project because one of the things we've really learned through COVID is that we're an essential service, and we have a lot of people who really rely on transit, and where transit agencies around the country, most transit agencies did see declines. We rebounded, and we actually held on to a lot of ridership throughout this pandemic, and we're at about 52% of our ridership pre-COVID. We've seen that increase as people are traveling again. So we expect a lot of that to come back. But in the long term, and that's what we're looking at this project, 40 years or so, we do expect to see growth. And, you know, it is helping people get to jobs, to school, just to their life needs, doctor's appointments. And those types of trips are always going to be needed and will be needed along the corridor, either short trips or even some of those longer trips where someone's trying to get from end to end. So, you know, we do expect there still to be a need, and we're planning to continue the project.
And thank you, Liz. She did make a comment from the city of Tacoma that protected bike lines require a physical barrier, like a concrete curb, between the bike lanes and traffic. And that's not what is out there now or what's shown in our rendering. So we will have to make those adjustments so it's clear as well to the community. Also, why are roundabouts clustered 3 in one short section of Pacific Avenue rather than spread throughout?
Okay, so when we did the evaluation, we went intersection by intersection, and there are some criteria that we set up, and following that criteria is really what led to these roundabouts being clustered in this area. One, we did not want to put in a device that would displace a business, and so we had to be able to make sure that the roundabout was going to fit. And so while there may have been some locations where a roundabout may have been a possibility, we couldn't displace a business or impact a property in such a way that that business can no longer operate.
Thank you.
And so at these particular locations, it just worked well in terms of how it operated and also what the adjacent impacts were.
Will you be installing parking stalls at any of the stops between the Spanaway station, besides the Spanaway station?
No, Spanaway Transit Center is the only facility where we're going to be building stops along the corridor. And part of that had been in our plans for many years now, because we have that Route 1, and there's a bus stop that's near, there's a super Walmart out there that has actually very high boardings. More than 300 people a day were boarding at this bus stop. It's the shoulder of the roadway, and at times we'd have 3 buses, maybe a paratransit vehicle, even a Beyond the Borders vehicle. So our current situation there, we've outgrown that zone, and so we have planned for a turnaround facility, park and ride, and then that operator comfort station. So, you know, that's been in our plans, and it'll be used not only for the Route 1, but then in the future for BRT as well. And that's really the only parking that will be out there. There is, let me add though, there's parking at Parkland Transit Center, and there's the Roy Y along the corridor in that southern segment as well.
All right. Covered shelters are great for riders if they become places to gather in inclement weather for non-riders. Is there a process in place to support rider access to covered areas? In the case of trash, how often will the trash receptacles be collected?
So, you know, we're working on a lot of these operation and maintenance plans now, and we'll be working on that with our facilities team, likely daily, and they'll have plans on how we're cleaning. You know, we're talking to a lot of other BRT agencies on how they manage those processes, because you know, it's a significant amount of stations and it's a significant amount of maintenance that we take on in order to have this type of a service. There will be either cameras that are monitoring different security features at these stations, so that, you know, we're aware of what's happening. And just like any of our facilities, we put some plans in place, and we try to work with our transit security and our supervisors to help us if we see issues at these facilities.
And are there any anticipated changes to the Parkland Transit Center?
No, we don't have anything in our plans to change at the Parkland Transit Center. This service, though, would not be going into the transit center. The station would be out on Pacific. And so it would be those other local routes that are still going into the transit center that would be using that facility.
I will add that 121st is a location where we are proposing a roundabout. So there is a small property acquisition actually at that location from the Parkland Transit Center. So there'll be a small reduction in probably a couple parking spots, but those are our spots that we use for transit supervisors. So the general parking there, which I can't remember off the top of my head how many parking stalls we have there, but the general park and ride will stay the same. So you won't see any loss of parking as part of that.
All right, with that, we have no further questions. We would just like to thank you again for tuning in and learning about Pierce Transit's first BRT project. And we want to thank our presenters tonight for the information that they provided. If you would like to get more information on our bus rapid transit project, you can visit our website at ridebrt.com. You can also email us at brt@piercetransit.org or call us at 253-983-3407. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone again for taking the time to attend tonight. Thank you.